It's kick-ass. Let's do it. Black Ops 1 Zombies, the game where Treyarch found their footing within the Zombies mode. This was the game where the developers became confident in themselves and in this game mode. Today I want to continue our conversation from the other day where we discussed World at War Zombies and this game mode's first inception. The link to that video will be down in the description in case you want to take a look. But for today, we're taking a trip back to the year of 2010. Actually, before I get ahead of myself, let's address this real quick. Zombies went from a game mode that wasn't even acknowledged on the main menu, hidden as an Easter egg behind the campaign in World at War, transforming from a hidden secret passion project that doubled down as a special thank you to players, now as a spot on the main menu screen front and center for everyone to immediately hop into if they so please. Included with this was an entirely different interactive menu in Black Ops 1, and it's the first time we heard this iconic song. Zombies wasn't just a game mode anymore, but an entirely different experience. Treyarch's small, passionate team was now allowed to work outside the campaign and multiplayer shadow. While still not considered to be a main driving force to bring players to the Call of Duty brand, it was at least some added depth that was now no longer a secret, and fans were loving it. Kino der Toten brought with it one major yet subtle aspect as well before even hopping into the map, and that's Treyarch's hit at some type of storyline behind what's really going on. In the days of Derice, thanks to the Flytrap Easter egg and hidden radios scattered around that map, there was a small amount of breadcrumbs left by Treyarch for players to discover on what was really going on behind the scenes. While it's still somewhat an experiment on Treyarch's part, or them simply teasing us, making people go mad with their own interpretation of the storyline and how these four characters came to be, fighting off hordes of the undead. Kino's loading screen certainly added to that, with Rick Toffin betraying his own thoughts on the others over a comic book style timeline that somewhat vaguely explained how these four unfortunate souls found themselves here in Kino.
Entry 741021! Perhaps this station will hold the key to the real goals of Group 935. I still do not trust my unconventional allies, but they are of great use to me. But I digress. Who would have thought the MDT was capable of time travel? How many stations does this group have? Where did that little girl disappear to? Only time will tell what new questions await us in this theater of the damned.
Let's go back to Kino. Set in an abandoned theater in the heart of Germany's capital, Berlin. Going from World at War to Black Ops 1, it's safe to say the quality is definitely improved. The blood and overall look of the zombies are much better, as well as the overall degradation of your ballistics on the zombies' anatomy is much more apparent, with limbs flying off, rib cages being totally exposed, and the shattering of their skulls by a headshot being much more visually satisfying than ever before. Aside from the 4 perks World at War introduced, Kino added one more to the list, as well as tweaking one of the perks that already existed. Quick Revive was now useful in a solo run, whereas in World at War it only had practical uses in terms of reviving down teammates and did nothing for a solo player. With the addition of Kino, Quick Revive gave solo players a chance at a second life, so to speak. For 500 points whenever you were downed, if you had Quick Revive equipped, you'd get back up after a small amount of time, avoiding an immediate game over. The catch? Well, technically there was 2. The first being, you can only buy Quick Revive 3 times. After that, the machine disappears entirely from this match. The other was whenever you got downed, you lost all of your perks, and with it, your third weapon. And by third weapon, I mean if you purchased a new perk that came with Kino, that being Mule Kick. Costing only 4,000 points, it gave players the ability to carry 3 primary weapons. Unfortunately, as time went on, Mule Kick slowly got a bad reputation, with players preferring mobility in the shape of stamina up over a third gun. However, at this time, Mule Kick was a great addition. It allowed players essentially to hold on to their most prized weapons that were found exclusively in the mystery box, prioritizing them in the 2 primary slots and using the third slot for either a wall weapon or something much less valued. So in the event if they ran out of ammunition, which will eventually happen, Mule Kick meant you were always having something in your hands without having to get rid of something you really weren't willing to, which in Kino's case meant having one of the 2 wonder weapons. The ray gun, or specifically in Kino's case, its brand new wonder weapon, the Thunder Gun. Probably the most iconic wonder weapon of them all. The Thunder Gun had infinite damage, so it was always a great option. It could also be Pack-a-Punch to expand its ammunition reserve, with it also receiving a badass name, the Zeus Cannon. Kino brought back Hellhounds and introduced one final addition as well, a brand new enemy type referred to simply as Nova 6 crawlers. They were consistently mixed in with regular zombies, however you didn't have to deal with them until power for the map was switched on. The catch with Nova 6 crawlers were, not only did you now have to direct your aim down at the floor in order to kill them, but whenever they were killed by any type of ballistics, they explode into a gas, which could affect your movement as well as completely distort your vision. The only way to avoid them exploding in this gas was one of two things, either knifing them or killing them with a ray gun or thunder gun. Kino der Toten is the map I'd argue that has the most nostalgia behind it. While it was the 5th map in the Zombies mode and debuted in the 2nd game to host the Zombies mode, considering it was much more readily accessible from the start with no barrier to entry placed behind the campaign, and with Kino's much more open map design, bringing back Pack-a-Punch with a simplified version of how to turn it on, with players being required to only sync up one teleporter instead of 3 as we've seen in Derice. Kino was a map that helped reignite the Zombies mode to bring it to an even wider audience, showing everyone everything this mode had to offer and so much more, in some ways making it easier for many people, in some ways making it more challenging for the advanced group in the form of the Nova 6 crawlers. However, in the slight chance that there was still a handful of players that wanted to spice things up just a little bit more, Kino wasn't the only Zombies map that launched with Black Ops 1. Kino was the only map immediately presented. However, the map 5, like Nocturne Tone from World at War, was rewarded to players who beat the campaign, or got so far into it to actually unlock 5. 5 arguably was the true first map to help really add complexity to the Zombies mode. 5 took place at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. Unlike the 4 characters from Kino that we played as, being Nikolai, Richtof, and Takio and Dempsey, 5 placed players in the shoes of 4 historical figures. John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States. Robert McNamara, the U.S. Secretary of Defense. Richard Nixon, the U.S. presidential candidate turned 37th President of the United States. And finally, Fidel Castro, Prime Minister of Cuba, later turned President of Cuba. The basic premise of the mode was essentially the same. Unfortunately, 5 didn't introduce any new perks. However, its sole purpose wasn't just to spice things up with a brand new crew, nor was it just to place us in the Pentagon's conference room, war room, and underground experimental labs complete with its own teleportation system. No, 5 brought with it a new way to access Pack-a-Punch, a way that was exclusive to just this setting only. In order to access Pack-a-Punch, after the player had already gone down into experimental labs underneath the Pentagon to turn on power, they then have to take the elevator back up, or head into the teleporter to get back into the war room. Once back into the war room, there are 4 switches that need to be flipped in order for the DEFCON level to reach 5. Once DEFCON 5 is achieved, you just have to run into a teleporter that'll transport you into the Pack-a-Punch room. It's actually fairly simple. Yet, given the tight spaces upstairs next to the railing and the many different spawn locations downstairs that the zombies can come from, it is a little bit challenging to try to reach the switches in the middle of a round. 5 also replaced what was previously known as dog rounds with the Pentagon Thief, a new enemy type who doesn't kill or down players, but instead his sole purpose is to hunt players down and take away their weapons. He's not a fatal enemy, but an annoying one that objectively speaking flips the zombies mode on its side. The Pentagon Thief turns zombies into a very intense game of tag. Basically, to explain him, when he spawns in, he targets a player, whose goal, ideally, is to kill the Pentagon Thief before he reaches them. If successful, the thief, who has an absurd amount of health, will die, giving players a max ammo drop along with a fire sale. The fire sale being a brand new power-up that activates all mystery box locations around the map simultaneously, and it makes every purchase of said mystery box cost only 10 points instead of the usual 950, which can be extremely beneficial since most of the best weapons are in the mystery box. It's a lottery ticket of sorts. A purchase of a mystery box spin was now the cost of one singular bullet hitting a zombie. All reward, no real loss, since you can easily get 10 points back. It also means in a game with multiple players, anyone can hit the box at any given time, eliminating any type of fighting for a box spin, giving every player an opportunity to get a great weapon, and maybe even this map's wonder weapon, the Winter's Howl. Widely considered to be the worst wonder weapon ever in zombies though. The Winter's Howl fires a blizzard that causes ice-based effects on the zombies. If that same zombie is hit again, it is stopped in its tracks and is encased in an ice cube. It's then immediately killed when encased by the ice, which will shatter when the player knife shoots or even walks through it. It will also shatter if left alone for a few seconds, but trust me, the description of the weapon far exceeds its practical uses, as by round 34 even a Pack-a-Punch version requires the entire magazine of 9 shots to even kill a zombie, something that's just downright laughable for what's supposed to be a wonder weapon, a brand of weapons that are known for their killing prowess. Mind you, you're rewarded with all that if you manage to kill the Pentagon Thief before he reaches you. If he reaches you, he takes whatever weapon is in your hands, and now you're forced to hunt him down and kill him before he gets away with your gun. Obviously, you don't need me to tell you how detrimental this could be on a later round. If he manages to steal a weapon that's pack-a-punched or is a great wonder weapon, it can easily turn what is a great run for you into a shitty one very quickly. The last big contribution of 5 was the introduction of the new Death Machine power-up, a power-up that granted the player a minigun with a bottomless magazine, allowing you to clear an entire horde and rack up points for every kill without any cost to your ammunition. All things considered, the 2 maps were more than perfect for Black Ops 1 to launch with, keeping players more than content. This was Treyarch bringing the Zombies game mode back to the front of people's minds. It wasn't until Black Ops 1's DLC season that Zombies really got elevated with new locations, crews, perks, wonder weapons, and their first foray into complicated Easter eggs. The next map in Black Ops 1's lineup as part of the first DLC pack actually brought 2 entirely new perks with it, mixed up how the Pentagon Thief worked with a little bit of how the Hellhounds from previous maps worked, and it took us to an abandoned Soviet cosmodrome in the 1960s. That map was called Ascension. Going back and replaying World at War then Black Ops 1, it's insane just how much Ascension brought to this mode, and you'll start to see this trend of incremental additions and tweaks here and there that helped make the overall feel of Call of Duty Zombies be much more refined, and much more confident in its design and existence as a standalone game mode. Ascension is often remembered as a map with the annoying zombie monkeys, which, as I said, was a mixture of the Pentagon Thief with the Hellhounds. Whereas the Pentagon Thief would outright attack the player and only go after the weapon in their hands, the monkeys in this map would actually target your perks, heading straight for whatever perks the player has equipped. Once they reach the machine, they'll start attacking it. Leave them be for just long enough and the perk would be stripped from you, forcing you to have to spend more points on a perk that you previously just had. As you start to open up the map and become much more established, with more areas of the map being accessible, and with it a new perk or 2 in your arsenal, made the monkeys a much more formidable enemy on higher rounds. While they had low health and were relatively easy to kill, it was difficult to protect all the perk machines, especially if you were playing solo, which often meant seeing your precious perk machines all being attacked at once, forcing you into a position where you had to prioritize which perk was more vital to your survival. So if in the event you weren't quick enough to defend all of your perks, you're at least left in a position where you aren't entirely vulnerable. Just like the Pentagon Thief, there's a giant reward for killing all monkeys before they touch any of your perk machines. If you manage to pull this off, you're rewarded with a brand new power-up, a perk bottle, giving the player a random perk for free, essentially giving us a chance to bypass the 4 perk limit for the first time in Zombies. A nice little addition as well was the perk icons start to be enlarged as an indication as to what perk machine is being targeted by the monkeys. Ascension also replaced the monkey bombs with the Matryoshka dolls, something completely unique to Ascension's Russian-inspired location, a Russian-inspired location that even carried over into the Bowie knife, with it being replaced by a buyable sickle. Before I continue to deviate a little bit, let's focus more on the Matryoshka dolls. They work similar to the monkey bombs they were replacing. They still attracted zombies, however, they now had multiple explosions instead of just one. Treyarch also added in the Gersh device, which worked as a tactical throwable, which basically was a black hole that sucked everything in it. Consummately, that was the sum of gameplay additions for the casual players. But there was more to be appreciated from the map starting in black and white, having the color tied to the power switch, players having to ride all 3 lunar landings similar to how you were expected to sync up the teleporters from Doris, with an additional step being added in Ascension where you have to launch the missile that's towering in the background in order for the pack-a-punch room to be deemed safe. Ascension was vital in many ways, with 2 new perks, one of them that being Stamina, becoming a staple in the mode for every iteration of Zombies from Black Ops 1 moving forward. Not only was the introduction of this perk, but the map layout of Ascension itself are to thank for players starting to adopt a more run-and-gun playstyle, in contrast from the traditional finding a good spot to camp in with your friends. Ascension was also the first map to have a real Easter egg, with players given the task of having a free Gersh. In order to do so, they're expected to complete a set of steps that were shower thought levels of comprehensive at best. Regardless of its complexity or the reason why Treyarch even decided to add it to begin with, this small inkling of objectives in Zombies was the first step in something else to do. But something to keep in mind was the Easter egg wasn't the main premise of Ascension. At the end of the day, the main point was still just to survive. The Easter egg was placed there as more for the diehard fans that were itching to learn more on the elusively intriguing story behind the Zombies crew. There was added depth for those that wanted to find it, and there was a different way to play Zombies by being a little bit more mobile, thanks thanks to Ascension's more free and open design along with stamina up, making players much more fluid in that movement. But while the story was slowly developing behind the scenes, thanks to the Easter egg, it was abruptly put on hold for the second DLC Black Ops, a DLC that has one of the most interesting cast and setting ever in Call of Duty Zombies. A map that was meant to be a movie set, placed somewhere in the blistering cold. A map that's come to be known as Call of the Dead.
Boys, let's get to work.
For God's sakes, he missed me again! Oh, cut! Are you blind, man? Like this. Ow! Oh, see? Oh.
I'm actually very curious to know how long Treyarch was aching to make this map and its crew a reality. Call of the Dead has a completely unique crew, with it being the first map to star a full cast of Hollywood celebrities. The premise of Call of the Dead puts players in the shoes of Michael Rooker, Robert Englund, Danny Trejo, and Sarah Michelle Gellar. With the exception of 5, this is also the only map that actually has an opening cutscene. But the 4 characters we play as are shooting a movie by the late great George Romero himself, the man often credited for bringing the concept of zombies to the public eye by placing them front and center in his films. And here we were, starring in one of his films. That is until the crew comes across a real zombie that ends up kidnapping Romero. Call of the Dead was the first zombies map to take place covered in ice, and it was in some ways a precursor to what we later get. Gone were the days of special zombies in the form of dedicated rounds. There was no hellhounds, there were no monkeys, there were no Nervous 6 crawlers. Instead, George Romero himself wandered around the map, slowly stalking the players. He's a constant threat, a threat that's introduced as early as round 1. While you can kill him, the insane amount of health he has makes it more trouble than it's worth to try to gun him down. It's much simpler to try to avoid him, which is something you want to do at all costs, especially not accidentally shoot him, because if you end up doing that and pissing him off, he explodes into a full-on sprint at you. A full sprint you cannot outrun since he's faster than you. Your only chance of surviving his sprint is if you run into the ice-cold water that's pretty abundant around this map. Similar to how it behaves in other maps, the water in Call of the Dead will slow you down. Thankfully, there are some benefits. As I said, it affects George Romero, calming him down to a slow walking speed, while also slowing most of the zombies down. Call of the Dead at the time was the biggest zombies map we've gotten up to that point. The player spawns in what's a fairly large spawn. You can practically begin to train if you wanted to. The only challenge being the water that George Romero slowly emerges from, since it will hinder your movement. But it's a good idea to stay over by quick revive on the far end, since everything will spawn and come from in front of you. From spawn, you're presented with going left towards the lighthouse or right into the crashed ship. The crashed ship is also where the power switch is located, along with a few nice additions to help get around the large map. Treyarch implemented a few zip lines to be able to go from one side of the map to the other. And on the ship, there's even something that works as a means to catapult yourself over to the lighthouse, or can also work as a nice little trap at no additional cost to you. All you gotta do is walk on the pressure plate, walk off of it, and watch the zombies get flung over to their death. Pack-a-punch in this map is also fairly easy, although it has a little bit of a risk-reward type of approach. Once you turn on power, Pack-a-punch can pop up in any of the ice-cold water locations, with a lighthouse functioning as a beacon for players to be able to immediately identify where Pack-a-punch is, meaning at a quick glance you can tell where you need to go in order to upgrade your weapon. The downside to this was, not only did the Pack-a-punch machine move, but with it being placed in the water that'll slow you down, you really gotta be vigilant and pick your time as to when you want to upgrade your weapons. While it's great to see the lighthouse play a role within the fundamental system of the game mode, this wasn't exactly a new concept. This is something that Kino did, with the maps on the walls having a green lit bulb indicating the mystery box's location. So technically speaking, maps were already quote-unquote interactive, visually communicating vital information to the player. Just now, it was expanded to cover the Pack-a-punch machine, in a way that was unique to Call of the Dead. Call of the Dead also continued the trend of adding in wonder weapons, with this map featuring 2 new ones. Technically speaking, the more useful of the 2 was called the Scavenger, a sniper rifle that fired off explosive rounds, which, thanks to the presence of PhD Flopper in this map, the player never had to worry about accidental splash damage from the sniper rifle. The other wonder weapon was a VR-11, a weapon whose most value came out of pretty much needing it in order to complete the map's main Easter egg. Yes, as with Ascension, there's a main Easter egg to be done for those that want it. It's a little bit more comprehensive this time around, with the Easter egg having a level of simplicity though that would start to be missed as the years of zombies went on. This time, the player was tasked with delivering a device to Edward Richtofen, who you can hear communicating with you over a radio by PhD Flopper. I also can't forget this map brought with us the last perk of Black Ops. Ops. Unfortunately, it was a perk that's still widely regarded as one of the most useless perks ever devised, which is Deadshot Daiquiri, essentially a perk that was created to aid those that were less skillful, as the perk made it where whenever you aimed, your gun would automatically target a zombie's head. Deadshot also reduced hipfire spread and reduces all weapon recoil, which it doesn't take me to explain that if you're already great at aiming, or if you're playing on PC where there's a lack of aim assist, this perk serves solely to waste your points. When one looks back on Call of the Dead, it's a unique time capsule for many different reasons, from the cast, its setting, the map layout, and really how the icon George Romero himself fit into it all. It wasn't just impressive. Call of the Dead was pivotal, far exceeding just gameplay. Call of the Dead, including its intro and ending cutscene from when you exited the map, that also added more to the storyline, with George Romero talking about Element 115 in front of every player that touched this map.
Years ago, I did research for a World War II movie. I came across some old Nazi documents. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Element 115, necromancers, raising the dead, real creepy stuff.
We're completely surrounded! Come on!
The coolest thing? Some of that crazy shit happened right here.
This was a map in overall production and quality where Treyarch and Activision showed to everyone that this wasn't just a hidden extra game mode anymore, but something both the developers and publishers are confident and passionate about, with them being more than willing to give this mode their all. In the final 2 DLCs of Black Ops, we aren't presented with any more cast or famous crew, or full-blown cutscenes going into or leaving the maps, but what we do get are maps that are much more bigger, providing new unique wonder weapons, ways to get around the maps, enemy types, and much more ambitious Easter eggs. It's quite the contrast to go from the blistering cold of Call of the Dead to being thrown in the middle of an ancient temple hidden somewhere in the Himalayas. The map that probably has one of the strongest love-hate relationships you will ever hear outside of Transit. Welcome to ShangriLa. Honestly, I'd consider ShangriLa to be the most beautiful out of all of the Black Ops maps. Set in a sunny ancient temple, the trend of making the maps large continued with ShangriLa. And just like with every map before it, with the exception of 5, players had the choice of going either left or right from spawn. ShangriLa, though, had a small deviation here. Whereas before, depending on whether if you went left or right, that'll change up wall weapons and perks that you will be able to find. In ShangriLa's case, however, there was a change up with how you access the underground area, as well as an interesting map hazard. If you went left, there's a pressure plate you'll have to continuously run along in order to avoid the quicksand, as the quicksand itself doesn't actually kill you, but it will slow your movement down to a crawl, pretty much making you a sitting duck. A little further on this side of the map, you also find a water slide that was accessible once power was turned on. On the opposite side of the map, instead of water slide, players can ride a minecart. While Call of the Dead had zip lines and the flinger to get around, different modes of transportation to move from point A to point B, ShangriLa's modes of transportation unfortunately took the player to the same exact spot, which was the power room, which is a little bit of a missed opportunity, as it would have been nice to see one of these lead somewhere different, but they both led to the same exact spot. And speaking of power, that's one of the few oddities this map has. This map, for no real reason at all, has 2 power switches that don't do anything, and there's nothing attached to them besides having to flip both of them on in order for power to be on. Obviously, power is important because just like all the maps before, it has to be on in order to be able to buy perks, access Pack-a-Punch, and although not directly tied to them, once power's on in this map, you'll notice special zombies would be a little bit more common. And the special zombies themselves have to be one of ShangriLa's more outstanding attributes, as this map introduces not 1, but 2 new zombie types never before in Call of Duty zombies. The first being the Streaker, a zombie that when near the player emits a loud, shriek, hurting the players, slowing down their movement, and distorting their vision. These were complemented rather annoyingly with the new Napalm zombie, who also slowed down player movement whenever they were nearby. However, if you get too close to the Napalm zombie, they would explode, hurting all nearby players as well as leaving behind a patch of flames, blocking off the player's path and hurting all zombies that ran through it. Both of these zombies were not considered to be part of the normal zombie round, so if you kill all regular zombies yet leave the Streaker or Napalm zombie, or even both, the rounds will continue. The Napalm zombie also was not affected by the insta-kill or nuke power-up. Luckily though, in order to balance both these zombies out, Treyarch made it where there was visual and audio cues to let you know when they're spawning in, or whenever they are around you, helping you to make sure you're not caught off guard by one or even both of them. Pack-a-Punch for ShangriLa is also highly ridiculed for being a little bit of a pain in the ass to access. You see, the Pack-a-Punch machine is actually similar to Derice, located in the spawn room. However, unlike Derice, where you gotta turn on power, then link up the teleporters, and ShangriLa, once you turn on power, you then have to find a pressure plate that you need to stand on in order to make the staircase for the Pack-a-Punch machine to appear. Sounds simple enough, until you realize, if you're playing with 4 people, Pack-a-Punch requires all 4 of you stand on all pressure plates simultaneously. In other words, if you have an uncooperative teammate or someone who just doesn't know what they're doing, or if they aren't that good at zombies and get overwhelmed easily, you're not going to be upgrading any of your weapons this game. That's a sad reality. Also, you have to do this every single time you wanted to Pack-a-Punch something, because once Pack-a-Punch was accessed, it was put on a timer. After a period of time, a massive amount of water would come rushing down, kicking the player off the stairs, with the staircase disappearing yet again, restricting players from using the staircase and the Pack-a-Punch machine as a spot to camp and hold out in, which is a little ironic considering this game mode's origins of wanting you to find a spot to camp in. ShangriLa probably has one of the most ideal camping spots, with it being the Pack-a-Punch machine, and yet Treyarch ensured that was not possible. An argument technically can be made that this was the first map to push players into more of a run and gun type of playstyle, to be more mobile. Unfortunately, the map layout really didn't cater to that, so I would say that's something that's overlooked. But ShangriLa wasn't all bad. Besides its beautiful tropical setting, this map added in the most unique wonder weapon of all time, a weapon that no one could even hope to dream to be able to properly announce. So it's affectionately come to be known as the baby gun, and it's coined the baby gun because whenever a zombie was hit with it, the gun didn't kill the zombie, but instead turned them to the size of a monkey. Once this size, players can simply walk over them, with their kick being more than powerful enough to kill the babyfied zombie. ShangriLa also brought back the monkeys from Ascension, however they operate a little differently now, since you can technically take advantage of them. Whereas in Ascension, monkeys would attack perk machines and strip the players away of their perks, here the monkeys would actually go after dropped power-ups, basically stealing your power-ups. The reason why it could be a good thing though, is once a monkey has grabbed your power-up, they'll start running over to the spawn room and up the staircase to Pack-a-Punch. As they're running back with the power-up, it starts to change, allowing players for the first time ever in zombies to manipulate what power-up they're going to be receiving, allowing anyone to transform a carpenter or anything else they don't want to a max ammo, or anything else you want. ShangriLa was also the map to take Easter eggs a step further. Although the map after this really brought it to the next level, ShangriLa made it where it was a 13-step Easter egg where the outcome would change depending on if you were doing it solo or with a group of people. And this was the first Easter egg where, as you're going through the steps, the map itself would start to change, going from bright sunny day to an eclipse, with it being in the middle of the night, arguably in some ways being a little bit more visually appealing. It's unfortunate that you can't actually make the map naturally like this without having to do the Easter egg. But ShangriLa is always going to be known for the Shrieker and Napalm zombies and how annoying Pack-a-Punch is. It's the 3rd map in the DLC of Black Ops 1. It's a map just like every map before it. As I said before, as you start looking at these maps, there's small incremental changes, there's a little bit of experimenting here and there, where Treyarch doesn't entirely change the game mode, but it does throw a wrench in the machine to keep players a little bit on their toes. Because of the annoyances, and that it's a little bit more difficult to be set up in ShangriLa versus other maps, I think ShangriLa suffered the same fate that Kino suffered from. It was squashed together between 2 maps that added in so much to change up the zombies formula that it's dwarfed by what the map before it and the map after it did. And the map after ShangriLa did so much. Gameplay wise, story wise, Easter egg wise. A map that was so ambitious across the board that it made it virtually impossible from a story perspective to make Treyarch continue with what was going on with whatever game came out after this. A map took us to such a unique location. There was almost no conceivable way as to how Treyarch can be even more ambitious with whatever came after this. And that map was Moon. With it being the 11th map in the Zombies game mode, Moon ended Black Ops 1 off with a bang. Treyarch yet again added more innovations and tweaks to make the setting feel entirely unique. Yet the changes were implemented in a very subtle way that didn't go against but rather added to the foundation of the Zombies mode, while simultaneously giving players exactly what they would expect from a map titled Moon. However, Treyarch wasted no time with switching everything up. You see, the changes with Moon started immediately. You don't start off on the Moon itself, instead you start at Groom's Lake in Area 51, or a location location referred to simply as No Man's Land. The reason why it's referred to as such is because rounds do not exist here. You'll be dealing with a seemingly infinite number of zombies spawning in alongside their old hellhound companions, with this being the first map in zombies history, starting you in an area completely separate from the main map itself. Groom's Lake doesn't just serve as a starting room though, it's also the location of the Pack-a-Punch machine and two of the most vital perks in zombies, that being Speed Cola and Juggernog. All three items are completely separate from the map's power source, the first in zombies history as well. Another first is how to trigger Juggernog or Speed Cola to spawn in. You see, when the map first starts, one of these two perks is going to be located here. In order for the perk to either switch or come back, you gotta teleport yourself to Moon and then come back to Area 51, where hopefully, if you had Juggernog or Speed Cola, the perk you're missing will now spawn in its place. This is the only location to find either one of these perks throughout this map. The rest of the perks are located on Moon. All of them are tied to power, as they were in maps prior. Let's return to Groom's Lake for a second. As soon as the match starts, zombies will start spawning in, with there being a 25-second grace period before the teleporter to the Moon is opened up. While you're at Groom's Lake, there are two distinct sounds that will be played. The first one is a buzzer indicating to the player the teleporter to Moon is now accessible. The second one is a sound similar to the tactical nuke from multiplayer, where every time that sounds, it's a cue for the player to know the zombie's health and speed will increase, something placed there to accommodate for the lack of rounds here. Groom's Lake over time became another source of players to invent challenges revolving around how long one can survive without having to teleport to the Moon, a challenge that Moon plays into thanks to the timer displayed when you teleport. But as I said a minute ago, this is where the real zombies experience begins. Once on the Moon, gravity is introduced, or the lack of it, and this is something that flips gameplay on its side, since thanks to the lack of it, zombies move a little bit slower, giving the player a tiny bit of room to breathe, if only for a moment. This also provides a small hazard, since if you run at full speed, even if you did so for just a few seconds, you'll lose your footing, with your momentum throwing you in the direction you were running in, which could mean you accidentally fly into a small horde of zombies, immediately ending the game. To accompany the low gravity and likewise the lack of oxygen, Treyarch introduced the new PES equipment, a vital tool to get around the facility on Moon, because without it, you'll suffocate, a fate followed swiftly by the game over screen. Mechanically speaking, this is the only way Moon really deviates in the zombies formula. Well, that and Moon's other hazard, the excavator, a giant saw that every so often would threaten to penetrate a part of the facility, and with it, depressurizing that section of the map. Something that's quite annoying, because not only would it cut off a portion of the map until the excavator is hacked, deactivating it, but also with that section cut into by the excavator, it would no longer have gravity or any air, which would mean you couldn't carry the new tool in this map, the hacking device. A device that's vital for the Easter egg, but also can be used to hack doors, perks, the mystery box, and anything else that can be bought. It's also the tool to deactivate the excavator itself. Sounds overpowered until you realize Treyarch made it where it takes a full minute to use this thing, making it virtually useless until someone trains a zombie for you. While annoying, you gotta give Treyarch credit for switching things up a little bit more. Where I said ShangriLa removed the most vital positions of camp, making that map have more of a pro-training, anti-camping type of feel, Moon arguably took that mentality a step further by ensuring the player wasn't content in just training in the biodome with the hacking device, since if they decided to do that, they'd be running the risk of getting a portion of the map depressurized and cut off, something that regardless of what, wasn't avoidable, as you have to go to Area 51 in order to Pack-a-Punch, and when you inevitably returned, your avenues of getting around Moon would be limited. Moon's additions didn't stop there though. The map introduced a new wonder weapon and a new tactical device. The new tactical device was called the Quantum Entanglement Device, or the QED. The QED has a myriad of uses. It can spawn in a ray gun, can spawn in a China Lake, can spawn in a power-up, can spawn in a Gersh device, it can revive a down teammate, and honestly so on. At times, while it is potentially useful, in some cases, it's almost like Treyarch couldn't think of what else to make, so they said, fuck it, let's make a tactical that does literally anything, but randomly. This map also added in, I know I said this a couple times already, but seriously, probably top 3 wonder weapons in all of zombies history, that being the wave gun. When you pick it up out of the mystery box, it's found in its dual wield form, which is called the zap guns, but you can combine them to create the wave gun. Regardless of which variant you have it in, this thing does infinite damage. Dual wielded zap guns will always be a one-shot kill to zombies regardless of what round you're on. The zap guns fire red balls of electricity that kill zombies instantly upon contact. It's almost similar to the Wonder Waff, although much more useful. When you combine them into the wave gun, this variant fires a purple beam that causes zombies caught in the blast to cough up blood, slowly expand, and then explode, which again is practically an instant death regardless of what round you're on. It's also incredibly useful against the Astronaut, a zombie type that is a mix of George Romero and the Pentagon Thief from maps prior. Thankfully his health isn't as high and can be killed although the offset for this is they spawn in much more often, yet there's only one at any given time. All of that on top of Moon's Easter egg where you literally fire rockets at Earth and blow it up. How can you not say Black Ops 1 Zombies ended off on a high note? From the early days of Kino's destroyed theater, the halls of the labs hidden underneath the Pentagon, to George Romero's terrifyingly realistic movie, to the ancient temples of ShangriLa, and now the low gravity of Moon, Black Ops 1 Zombies will always have a strong place for nostalgia factor, but also Treyarch's confidence in the game mode, and really pushing their imaginations and players' skill level at surviving to the ultimate limits. From World at War's hidden Easter egg days, locked behind a campaign, to now destroying the planet, the confidence and assurance that the development team behind this project, behind this game mode, makes it feel almost entirely differently from the last game this mode was presented in. The basic formula, the basic rules were set in stone, players knew what the foundation was, and every map that was given in Black Ops 1 only continued to build off that foundation to make it stronger, to make it better, and make it feel like a much more refined experience. And as one final thank you note, in this final DLC of Black Ops 1, Treyarch remastered all of the maps from World at War in the Black Ops 1 engine, bringing some additions to make those maps feel even better than they ever did before. It's a little insane when you think about it. Black Ops is the second game to have this game mode in, and the amount of stuff that we've seen throughout the evolution of the game mode in just this game, the content and the appreciation level that we see with those maps, even though they're ultimately bare bones by today's standards, the fact that the entirety of that content was just remade for the second game is honestly very impressive, especially when you see the way that Activision continues to move with this game mode moving forward, which we're going to be taking a look at in the next video. Black Ops 2 is going to be the next game, obviously, that we're going to be taking a look at in this series, and if you're interested in it, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button. If not, I thank you for watching this either way.